Hey everybody, what's going on? I am Greg Sussman, joined today by Jim Sonis of FanDuel as we continue looking at Week 10 from a daily fantasy perspective, giving you some of the undervalued players here on this week's slate. That starts us with the Atlanta Falcons, Jim Sonis. Hey, I didn't even say hello to you. What's happening, Jim?
I'm all good, Greg. I think that I understand why you were ready to jump in here because the Falcons, they're pretty fun offense. So I get it. Obviously, the defense stinks. So it's a fun game. But hey, we can use cheap guys and get exposed to shootouts. So I am fine and dandy. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. You're right. I saw we're talking about the Falcons today, and I was excited because this one has a high-scoring affair written all over it. Alvin Kamara is back for New Orleans. Matt Ryan, healthy, back for Atlanta. Should be a fun one. We start with Matt Ryan on today's Hurry Up, who's priced at $7,500 in New Orleans. Could be a big game for him.
Yeah, it really could. Because I think that when you look at this Falcons team, both from a salary perspective and a betting perspective, I think that the stink from the defense has kind of filtered over into the offense too. If you look at their team total on FanDuel Sportsbook right now, it's 19 points. And normally we don't want to use guys in DFS who are tied to such a bad offense, but the Falcons offense has actually been pretty good this year. They rank 11th once you adjust for their schedule based on number fires metrics. And Matt Ryan has been good. He's not been the reason that things have gone off the rails for Atlanta. It's been the defense. Matt Ryan has still been good. And I think that getting him in the spot at $7,500 is pretty enticing. Yeah, New Orleans defense is pretty good. They rank ninth against the pass, but we also saw Ryan face the Vikings. It was another spot where they had to throw a bunch, but Matt Ryan, over 304 yards passing in that game. He had a pair of touchdowns, 20.56 FanDuel points. And he's got good enough pieces around him where I think that Matt Ryan is someone we can use even when he's in pretty tough matchups. We know the Falcons are going to throw. The Saints are actually better against the rush than they are against the pass, and the Falcons can't run the ball to begin with anyway. So I would expect pretty heavy volume here from Matt Ryan and enough efficiency for him to come through at $7,500. Now, he is pretty close in salary to guys like Kyler Murray and Jameis Winston. I like both those guys quite a bit. So you don't have to force in Matt Ryan, but I think if you're on a lineup with Kyler Murray and you need $200 extra dollars, I think it's totally okay to bump down to someone like Matt Ryan in a game where he should throw the ball a ton, he should score some points, and this game should be pretty intriguing. So I think that Matt Ryan is someone we don't want to overlook for this weekend. He's $7,500. He's been awesome for fantasy all year long, and I think he should get back to that once again on Sunday.
With Matt Ryan being back and healthy, he should be able to put up a lot of points. You got to remember, the Atlanta Falcons defense, that's the worst part of this team. It's not the offense. We've been able to use Matt Ryan on a weekly basis, both in season long and daily. You got to hope Matt Ryan puts up the points that the Falcons need and the points us fantasy players need in order for us to all be successful on Sunday. Let's move on to the running backs, and that brings us the Buffalo Bills and Devin Singletary. He had the breakout game we've been waiting for last week, and now the Bills travel to Cleveland to face off against the Browns. He's priced at $6,700. Do you expect a repeat performance from Devin Singletary?
Yeah, I think a breakout performance is one thing, and that's good to see a player perform well, but I think the usage behind what Devin Singletary did is a big thing there. It was partly inflated because they were facing Washington and they got up early, so they were able to run the ball a bunch, and Singletary finished that game with 20 carries and 4 targets. I would not expect 20 carries once again on Sunday, even though it is a pretty windy game, but even if the Bills fall behind, which they could do against the Browns, because the Browns, are still a team that has some talent, I could see that happening. If that does happen, all it will do is inflate the target total for Devin Singletary, and he's shown this year he can do some pretty good things in the passing game too, which is why I think that Devin Singletary is someone we can use even if we assume the Bills struggle in this game, because he should get work in the passing game and he should get early down work, which he did gain away from Frank Gore last week. He is $6,700, and I think that when you're getting a guy who should be pretty safe regardless of how things go from a game flow perspective, it's kind of hard to pass up. This Browns defense has had its issues this year. They're much healthier now than they were in the past with their cornerbacks being healthy. So that's good, but they're not an elite defense that we need to fear. And I think that that's good for Devin Singletary. Now, there is still the risk here that he could lose some goal line work to Frank Gore. Gore had 3 carries inside the 5 last week, whereas Singletary had just 2. But I think even with that being considered, Singletary is still someone whose floor should be good enough from the yardage. We can be okay even if he does lose a touchdown to Frank Gore. So Devin Singletary, I think that role change we saw last week is pretty legit. He'd been playing a bunch of snaps before that, getting work as a receiver. So I would expect this to stick. And I think that at $6,700, it does make sense to buy Devin Singletary off that big game because if he keeps getting this usage, he's going to be a really hard guy to pass up.
If that usage is there, Devin Singletary is going to make the most of his value priced at $6,700 here. If the Buffalo Bills have struggle on offense in this game, they'll have to use Singletary in that passing game, as you mentioned, which allows the floor to be a little bit higher than some of the other guys priced in this range. Singletary, a fine selection on Sunday. Up next for us, staying at the running back position, it's David Montgomery as the Bears are home against Detroit. Running backs have taken advantage of the Lions for a while now. Montgomery's priced at $6,400. He's been looking good the last couple of weeks. Can he continue to roll on Sunday?
Yeah, Devin Singletary's role change came last week, but for David Montgomery, we've actually seen 2 weeks of him in this new role. And the thing that's encouraging for me about David Montgomery is that he had that good role both in a game where they were winning late against Los Angeles and in a game where they were losing the entire game against Philadelphia. What that says to me is that David Montgomery is probably going to play this same role almost regardless of the game script, which bodes well for him here as a very slight home favorite against Detroit. Montgomery played 73% of the snaps in both those games. He had not topped a 70% snap rate the entire year before week 8. And again, they were trailing for most of that second game, and he still was on the field a bunch. They didn't necessarily go to a ton of Tariq Cohen. This Lions defense is ranked 27th in success rate allowed to opposing running backs, which means that Montgomery should be pretty efficient in the ground game volume that he does get. Basically, what you're getting out of David Montgomery is a guy who will probably get in the high teens from a carries perspective. He'll probably get 4 or 5 targets and play about 70% of the snaps. When you're getting that for a guy who is a slight home favorite, I'm not sure that's justified that he is a home favorite, but it's bookmakers are pretty smart. So I think that we can at least mention that he is a home favorite here. For just $6,400, I think that's really attractive. If I had to pick between Montgomery and Singletary, I think I feel a bit better about Montgomery getting this good workload. So I think I would probably side with Montgomery by a hair, but both are really good options. If you need to spend down at running back in cash games, I think you could consider Montgomery there as well, whereas I'd probably not go towards Singletary. So I think I feel pretty good about David Montgomery, both for cash games and for tournaments. Again, I'd rather spend up at running back for both formats, but I think if you need to spend down, David Montgomery is probably your best bet.
Yeah, absolutely. David Montgomery, as you said, the breakout kind of happened on the changing of the guard a couple of weeks back. Matt Nagy knows in order to keep the Bears in this thing, they have to rely on the running game. Mitchell Trubisky is just not good enough. David Montgomery, well, he is good enough. So let's take advantage here on Sunday. Moving on to the wide receivers, Jim, and that brings us to Robbie Anderson. I know things aren't exactly coup de la with the New York Jets right now, but against this Giants secondary, Robbie Anderson certainly seems like a good start and priced at under $6,000. Why not?
Yeah, you're definitely taking on some risk with Robbie Anderson, but I think that this is the type of spot where you are okay taking some risk with a low salaried wide receiver. When I look back at perfect lineups last year on FanDuel, there was a trend that emerged with cheaper wide receivers. Cheaper wide receivers tended to have big games and make the perfect lineup when they were at home, they were slight underdogs, and they were high A-dot wide receivers. And Robbie Anderson checks all of those boxes as the Jets are 2.5-point dogs at home, in air quotes, against the Giants for this weekend. But regardless, they are not on the road. That is a good thing for Sam Darnold, who has been better at home in his career than he has been on the road. And it's good for Robbie Anderson because if Sam Darnold can connect on those deeper throws more often, it's going to benefit Robbie Anderson. This Giants defense is ranked 24th against the pass this year, so it's a good matchup for Robbie Anderson. That helps him as well. And I think that there are just enough things working here for Anderson where I do want to go here. Now, for cash games, I think I'd rather try to find the money to get up to someone like Golden Tate, who is $6,300 and in this exact same game. But for tournaments, Anderson makes a lot of sense. And I think that there's actually a good number of plays in this game. Jamison Crowder is $6,500. He's had a really good role. Darius Slayton is $5,600. So the Jets-Giants doesn't appear that attractive at first glance, but there actually are some pretty good fantasy pieces and guys with big upside. I think that Anderson is a guy with the biggest upside for $5,900. And even though it is risky, I'm going to go right back again this weekend.
Risk is definitely there for Robbie Anderson. Sam Darnold hasn't been exactly hot throwing the deep ball as of late, but against this Giants secondary that we saw what Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup can do, why not go with Robbie Anderson? Take an opportunity to really capitalize on some low ownership here with Robbie Anderson. He's under $6,000 and could be a major contributor to your FanDuel team on Sunday. One more wide receiver to get to, Jim, and that's Calvin Ridley. We mentioned Matt Ryan before. Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley is a connection I want a piece of, and Ridley, stupidly priced, man, at $5,300. He's healthy. Matt Ryan's healthy. You know that Marshawn Lattimore is going to be on Julio Jones. This is a must start for me, man.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley, I think is just like you said, he's crazy cheap at $5,300. And if you want to jam in guys like Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas, which I very much do, it's a lot easier to do so when you have Calvin Ridley in there at $5,300. So game stacks here are pretty easy to do. And I think that Calvin Ridley, like you said, should get a good number of targets here, partially because Marshawn Lattimore will be playing against Julio Jones, but also because there's no more Mohamed Sanu. In the first game without Mohamed Sanu, we did not have Matt Ryan here, so Russell Gage got 9 targets there. Ridley still had a pretty good role, though. He had 7 targets in that game, and he's had multiple deep targets in every game except for 2 so far this year, and he did get a couple of deep targets even with Matt Schaub at quarterback, which I think bodes well for him. So we know he has upside, as we've seen a lot of times so far this year. He actually had 11 FanDuel points in week number 8, even with Matt Ryan not being there, even without a touchdown, which means that his floor is pretty good too. So what you're getting is a guy who has a lot of talent, should see 7 or 8 or so targets, and has the ability to bust things out, especially with Atlanta projected to throw a bunch in this game. I think that Calvin Ridley is one of the better value options on the entire slate. Again, I want to spend up at running back for guys like Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, and Alvin Kamara, and using someone like Calvin Ridley really assists me in trying to get there. He does not hurt your upside for your team because he can definitely have a ceiling game. So I think that Calvin Ridley is someone I'll probably have a lot of this weekend, and I don't feel all that risky in doing so, even though he is a bit volatile as a wide receiver.
I know the volatility is there, but as I mentioned, Calvin Ridley at this price of $5,300 in this matchup, it's a no-brainer. I think you got to start your lineup with that. As you said, you want to pay up a running back with Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara and all the other guys up top. You got to find value. And Calvin Ridley is the perfect type of value in a high-powered offense when the top cornerback on the other team is obviously guarding Julio Jones. It's a perfect spot. Calvin Ridley belongs in your lineups. And now our roll of the dice at tight end brings us to Jackie D, Jack Doyle, going up against the Miami Dolphins this week. Jackie D scored a touchdown last week. You think he can do it again here, Jim?
I hope so, and I'll feel a lot better about him scoring touchdowns if Jacoby Brissett does play. We're recording this on Thursday, so we don't know right now if Brissett will play. He did catch that touchdown from Brian Hoyer, so you could still consider Jack Doyle if Brian Hoyer were to start, but I'd feel a lot better about him if he had the better quarterback there in Jacoby Brissett. And it's also assuming that T.Y. Hilton sits. T.Y. Hilton did not practice once again on Wednesday, and what happens when T.Y. Hilton is out is we get a target bump for Jack Doyle. In the 2 games that Hilton has missed, we've seen Jack Doyle get 16% of the Colts' targets. He has 3 deep targets the entire year, but 2 of those have come in the 2 games that T.Y. Hilton has missed. Also in those 2 games, Jack Doyle becomes their go-to guy near the red zone. He has 4 red zone targets in those 2 games, which gives him, like you said, a good shot at getting another touchdown. He is $5,200. That's a pretty good number. I think that there are other guys in this range who are worth considering. Gerald Everett is up at $57. Jared Cook is $58. Greg Olsen is $5,100. I would not be too upset if I had to settle for him. And if you want to go at O.J. Howard as he returns from his injury, I think you can do so. I'm not necessarily recommending that, but you can do that if you feel so inclined. But the guy I feel best about, assuming that Brissett does play, is Jack Doyle. $5,200, should get a target bump with T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell out. And he's shown in the past that he can be a fixture near the goal line. So of those guys, Jack Doyle is my favorite at 52.
Like we said, it's a crapshoot. It's a roll of the dice. Doesn't really matter who you go with. But Jack Doyle at $5,200. Fine price, good opportunity to touchdown. Great matchup here against Miami. Get Jack Doyle in your lineups. That's going to do it for us here on the FanDuel Hurry Up. Jim, it's been a blast. Good luck this weekend. I'll be rooting for you, bud.
Thank you, Greg. Same to you. Enjoy all the football. We'll talk to you again next week.
Tomorrow on the show, Gabe Morency will join me for his 6 best bets. Enjoy Thursday Night Football tonight. For Jim Sanas, I'm Greg Sussman. We'll see you tomorrow.